Good morning. Welcome to our Public Affairs Forum at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. I'm Bonnie Gardner, co-chair of the forum. Our forums are free and open to the public and occur most Sundays at noon. You can find out more about our forums by going to our website at www.austinuu.org and clicking on Public Affairs Forum. Our mission is to nurture the mind and the spirit and serve social justice. Today I'm quite honored to introduce our speaker, Ben Sargent. And he is a Pulitzer Prize-winning political journalist and cartoonist. He's going to be talking about the enormous changes in media and political cartooning since the advent of the digital environment, for better or for worse. He's a sixth-generation Texan, originally from Amarillo, and was born into a newspaper family. He began learning the family trade at 12 at printing. He attended Amarillo College and then came to University of Texas, where he majored in journalism and graduated in 1970. He's a reporter and has covered the state capitol for a variety of newspapers, Corpus Christi Caller, the Long News Service, the American Statesman, and he was syndicated through United Press International. And he began his cartoon work in the American Statesman in 1974 and then went into national distribution through the Universal Press Syndicate in 1985. He semi-retired from the American Statesman in 2009, but he continued his cartooning through 2014. Now he's doing cartoons for the Texas Observer. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1982 and has been a Pulitzer Prize winner two other times. He's won so many different awards, I can't even mention them all, but Texas Civil Rights Project Molly Ivins Give 'em Hell Award in 2008, Daily Texan Hall of Fame in 2014, Women in Communications, Texas Women's Political Caucus, the Headliners Club. He's written two books, Texas State House Blues in 1980 and Big Brother Blues in 1984. And he's married to Diane Holloway, who's a retired, very well-known Austin American Statesman TV critic. They have two children and grandchildren. Again, I'm so honored that he's here. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the invitation to come over to visit with you this morning in the forum, and I've always enjoyed it, and glad to see all of you here. Wanted to visit with you, as Bonnie said, about changes in our society that you all are all very familiar with the advent of digital communication and just some of the changes that it has wrought in the world of media, and in particular in editorial cartooning. This picture I have here is not me. This is Heraclitus of Ephesus, who is an antique Greek who is primarily known for a single quote from his writings, that nothing endures but change, all is ebb and flow. And we know that change is a constant, certainly. Sometimes it's gradual, and sometimes it's explosive. And as you're aware, the ways that we receive and share information has changed in our lifetime with next snapping speed. Not more than a quarter of a century ago, a now quaint relic called the daily newspaper was the source of much of the information we received every day about our communities and the world. And when that newspaper indulged in opinions about issues and events, it spoke with an institutional voice. It came naturally from being the community's one commonly shared source of reliable information. Agree or disagree, that opinion had significance and authority because it was in the newspaper. And from that lofty pulpit spoke not just the editorial writers, but the editorial cartoonists, who were confident that the authority of the newspaper made their opinions worthy of the reader's consideration. Cartooning kind of became part of that mix after about 2 centuries ago. Printing technology reached a point where cartoons could be widely reproduced and distributed. hundreds and thousands and millions of viewers at once. And it was a particularly popular and effective form of editorial communication because of the nature of cartoons. Scott McCloud has a wonderful book called Understanding Comics. It's just about how pictures work in that regard. And he said that cartoons have what he said was a special power that is, quote, the ability to focus our attention on an idea. And that special power makes them an ideal medium for commenting on, satirizing, assaulting, and lampooning the political and social concerns of the day. And while advances in printing were making it steadily cheaper to spread current news and opinion to whole societies at once, advances in printing pictures made it steadily more practical to make cartoons a part of that mix. Thus was born the time-honored gold standard of political cartooning, the traditional, staff-produced, mass-distributed newspaper editorial cartoon. And that was where I spent my career, was in that medium. And after a century and a half of that traditional newspaper cartooning, there's some melancholy news. That traditional editorial cartoon is probably as dead as the traditional media outlets that spawned it. That doesn't mean that we cartoonists did anything wrong, or that good, often brilliant work isn't still being done every day and continue to be done far into the future by cartoonists working in the traditional print environment. It just means that traditional media, primarily daily newspapers and traditional broadcasts, have passed the tipping point beyond which they no longer function in society with the authority which their pervasiveness earned them in an earlier age. And so by extension, neither do those cartoons on their pages. When traditional media dominated the information consumed every day by the public, they were a centralizing and socializing force. At any given time, they brought everyone in the community around the same campfire to hear the same story at the same time. And that lent particular force to their content because leaders, followers, and the public at large all received the same news and opinions at the same time. And all of them knew that everyone else was simultaneously sharing that information. Cartoons were part of that mix and spoke with an authority that they derived from the newspaper's high place in the information hierarchy. It was a time that cartoonists really could fancy themselves journalistic gladiators, with politicians trembling at their every pen stroke. But then, in a period that everyone here can remember, the means of delivering information to people changed suddenly and profoundly. The advent of digital creation, transmission, and consumption of information completely overturned the communication model that had prevailed in every literate society in the world for 500 years. And the math is unmistakable. In the last 30 years, the nightly audience for network news has fallen from more than 50 million people to about 20 million. And in the last 20 years, paid daily newspaper circulation has fallen from 62 million to 43 million. And I'm told that there are not fewer people out there consuming. So now we live in a whole new world, not just in how information is transmitted and received, but in how it shapes our experience and our society. And if traditional media are a centralizing force, digital media are an atomizing force. The digital environment is one of practically perfect chaos in which information is split up into billions of little pieces and stuck back together in infinitely random and constantly changing ways. So in this digital age, the traditional cartoon is suddenly outside its native habitat. In the old regime, it inhabited an orderly, well-organized world with well-defined information providers and information consumers. In the digital world, the cartoon is one grain in a highly disorganized and constantly moving sandstorm of data, which may give it infinitely wider exposure, but takes away that traditional voice of authority it derived from its perch in the old print hierarchy. In my youth, there was a learned man named Marshall McLuhan who became very famous, theorizing about the effects that media, meaning all the ways we receive information, have on how we see and relate to everything in our societies and our lives. The age of print, he said, had produced a world of organization, order, classification, and well-defined relationships. But it was coming to an end. A new age was coming, McLuhan said, in which media would be pervasive and all around us all the time, making everyone a universal producer and consumer of information in a completely unstructured way. He called it the global village. And he predicted it would eventually sweep away all the structural hierarchies of the print world. And McLuhan at that time was thinking about television. This was back in the 60s. So he didn't live to see the digital revolution. And if he had lived to witness computers, the internet, the cloud, and all the onrush of that digital revolution, it would have proven even his revolutionary predictions timid at best. So if the print-driven hierarchical structure that defined the traditional editorial cartoon is passing away, do cartoons have some new role to play in the global village? Well, pictures are still pictures. And in fact, an estimated 6 billion pictures are uploaded to the web every day. They still have that special power, that uncanny knack for bypassing the rational mind and speaking directly to the unconscious. And cartoon pictures still are defined by their special ability to focus our attention on an idea. The power of the pictures hasn't changed, but the ways in which the viewer finds, receives, appreciates, and shares the cartoons are a whole new digital world whose relationships and dimensions are still undefined because they're still constantly changing. All we know is it's not the orderly old world of print and its printed newspapers. And even though we're rushing headlong into the age of digital communication, the future of free democracy will still depend on the practice of journalism. That is, maintaining a flow of complete, reliable, and generally circulated information to the citizenry. Likewise, a free democracy also requires the practice of freely commenting, attacking, satirizing, and lampooning its affairs. Cartooning is the act of performing that vital function using the power of picture. But cartoonists in the digital age are still having to feel their way toward two necessary elements for effective opinion cartooning. One is a viable economic model to keep the cartoonists alive and working. And the other is that authority to make the opinions worthy of your consideration. An authority which cartoonists in the print era borrowed from their newspapers, but which cartoonists in the digital era have to establish for themselves. But that is happening. Here's a case in point, a regular opinion strip drawn by a friend of mine, Jen Sorensen, who now lives here in Austin. It's a regular feature called Slowpoke. She's won a Reuben, an RFK, and I think she's probably on track to bag herself a Pulitzer. Her cartoons are pointed and powerful, but they don't have that implied authority from somewhere else. So they have to make their own through wit, intelligence, and clever design. And she's not the only one. There are many other first-rate cartoonists staking out the new frontiers of the digital world. Cartoonists such as Ted Rall. Love that. Dan Perkins, a.k.a. Tom Tomorrow. Wonderful animator Ann Telness in the Washington Post. And while they're on the cutting edge of cartooning's future, their style is still founded in the time-honored tradition of past masters such as Gary Trudeau, Jules Pfeiffer, and of course the great Walt Kelly. So the digital future will probably include web cartoons, animation, device apps, cartoon reporting, interactive cartooning, and God knows what else. It'll be a different world, but it'll be one where cartoons will still have an active life in the public square. So that's sort of my little spiel here. So probably open it to questions.
In other countries, political commentators and cartoonists are in danger. Have you ever experienced anything like that here?
American cartoonists are very sort of coddled in the protections that our legal and constitutional systems afford us here. And we really, I know that at our annual meetings of Association of American Editorial Cartoonists, it's always held in conjunction with another organization. It's kind of like Amnesty International for cartoonists, and it looks out all around the world for cases where cartoonists are being oppressed or harassed by their governments, and goes to their aid and tries to get international attention put on it. Cartoonist Rights Watch, it's called. And it always is very striking when they have and they will, once a year, they will bring one cartoonist from overseas to our meeting to, where we present them with an award for their courage and their in practicing their craft. And it always is really striking when you think about that if I'm drawing cartoons here in Austin, Texas, I don't have to worry about a knock on the door or having tanks surround my house or having goons break in and break my hands with a hammer. It's on the one hand, it's sort of clear evidence of still the power of cartoons in the world of opinion and information, and how terrified tyrants and dictators are of cartoons. And we all are familiar with the whole Charlie Hebdo episode in Paris and how terrifying that was, and what a challenge that was to the whole concept of free expression. So yes, in other countries, it is often still an act of great courage to draw an editorial cartoon and put it in the paper if it challenges the sitting regime. So yeah, I think American cartoonists need to reflect every once in a while on how precious our freedoms and our system is, and two, on just how powerful cartoons can be and are, especially in other countries.
I wanted to know, you mentioned Marshall McLuhan. In the 60s, one of his statements was the medium is the message. I just wanted to know your opinion, if that's how well that holds today.
Well, as I say, that was that book of his was considered very radical at the time, back in the late 60s, and people thought, well, what is he talking about? How could this happen? Because at that time we were in a world that was so structured in terms of our media environment. We had newspapers all over the place. We had very powerful broadcast networks. We thought, how could this structure be changed? And so it was sort of an amazing thing that all of us have lived through when digital media appeared and just completely overturned that old structure and that old regime and sort of bore out the things that McLuhan said. And like I said, at that time he was not even aware of digital media. There was no concept of it. He was really thinking about the effect that television would have on media. So I think he would have been amazed by the changes that did take place in a very short time.
Cartoonists seem to be a dying breed. I read an article, I can't recall the exact nature of it. The number of cartoonists are shrinking in the digital world.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like we said, the traditional structure of the business where you had a cartoonist who was on the staff of a newspaper, was a full-time staff member of that paper, is dropping precipitously. When I started in the business in the mid-'70s, there were about 250 full-time editorial cartoonists in the United States. Now there are fewer than 60. So there are more people in the United States Senate than there are in editorial cartoonists. And in Texas, there's one. The entire state of Texas has Nick Anderson at the Houston Chronicle, who is an exceptionally talented cartoonist, but he's the only one left in Texas because as cartoonists would, it's like Molly Ivins said about the newspaper business. It's the only business she knew of that would meet an economic challenge by making the product worse. I think editors. It seems to me that readers still enjoy editorial cartoons and enjoy consuming them, reading them, but I think editors see them as sort of a frill that they can get rid of easily. And in many cases, when cartoonists have left, like when I left the Statesman, I don't think anybody even thought that I would be replaced, which I was not. A lot of cartoonists have left their jobs, or retired, or not replaced. Jobs have been eliminated, like at the Dallas News. Cartoonists have just been simply let go, like in San Antonio, and not replaced. I'm sorry?
Is there any way to reverse this
Well, I'm not sure. It would probably take an editor by editor convincing job. But I think that just the nature of cartooning has changed so much, and the sort of the platform from which cartoonists speak has changed so much that I'm not sure we'll see a return of that traditional model for editorial cartooning. But as I say, lots of good cartooning is being done in digital fora, which it's sort of a whole different kind of cartooning and different kind of world. But so people still enjoy cartoons, and it's still a very effective, like we were talking about, especially in overseas. Certainly an effective way of expressing opinion. But so it'll work out. I mean, it'll come out in some other form. But I think the traditional model is passing from the scene.
Hi, thanks for speaking. So take a common internet-based media, say political magazine, and they will, with each of their articles, will have often a picture of the person in the article, and then sometimes they'll have an editorial cartoon associated with it. And so I guess my question for you is, if the editors of an online media are selecting the cartoon to go with a story, is that different than the way the model used to work, where the cartoonist would present to the editorial board something to run in a particular day, let's say? And so if so, does that change the effectiveness of the cartoon because the editors are picking which one they want to go with their story?
Right.
Does that make
Yeah. Anytime that a political cartoon to be really effective needs to be sort of a standalone, like a column would be of a columnist or something. And so, if it is a situation in a particular medium where the editor is using the cartoon as sort of an illustration for a story, then that does make it sort of a different beast. And so the traditional kind of editorial cartoon should really kind of be a standalone kind of medium. And so, of course, in its original form, like back in the Napoleonic days, when cartoons were lithographed and were sold on the street, you would find a guy on the street selling these lithographs by James Gilray or William Hogarth or somebody. Those were certainly standalone because you would buy that one cartoon; it was not even in a newspaper. So their ancestry is to be sort of a standalone medium. So that would kind of be the difference.
You've talked about the effect of digital distribution of media. To what extent have you and other cartoonists adopted digital means in the creation of cartoons?
Well, it depends on, I guess, your own skill and knack for the new digital media. There are some that have adapted to it. We talked about Nick Anderson over in Houston. He draws his cartoons. There is no paper and ink there involved. He draws them on a pad, draws them on the computer, and they're beautiful. They're just. He really has learned how to use all the wonderful graphic tools that computers afford us now. I guess I'm kind of half and half. When I do one of my cartoons now for the Observer, I do the basic drawing with ink, with the brushes and pens on Bristol board, but then I'll scan it in and do the coloring in the computer, in Photoshop. But there are a number of cartoonists who have used the wonderful graphic tools that computers afford us and use them to produce their cartoons. So I think lots of people are really taking advantage of the new tools that they afford. The great Jeff McNelly, whose cartoons you all may be familiar with, he switched over to drawing on the computer at some point, and none of us knew that he had done it until a couple of years later. And he was, at some meeting, he was telling us all about it. We said, "What?" Because they look the same, but he was such a wonderful craftsman, but he had found ways to use that, and he claimed that he had and so he would finish his cartoon and then it would be transmitted digitally, it's stored digitally somewhere, and he claimed that he had a sensor implanted in his heart so that when he died, it would send out a signal that would automatically erase all of those crimes. Don't know if that happened or not. But yeah, so for myself, I do a little something on the computer, but I'm mainly stuck in the old ways. I tell people that I can set type by hand, I can fire a steam locomotive, I can saddle a cow pony, so I'm kind of more at that level of technology.
We enjoy your artwork so much. And,
thank you.
And could you tell us where you learned to draw so well, Mr. Sargent? And also, since you work with your own old-fashioned hand, that does make a difference, I suspect.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just have always enjoyed drawing. When I was a little kid, I would draw, and but I never really thought I was going to wind up doing it for a living, because I just kind of fell into editorial cartooning. I got a journalism degree and came from a newspaper family and thought I was going to wind up being a newspaper reporter for my entire career. And just at one point happened to fall into editorial cartooning. I was working at the Statesman as a reporter and kind of doing some drawings on the side for some of the other reporters' stories, to illustrate their stories. I left the Statesman, went to work for the wire service, but I kept on doing the drawings on sort of a freelance basis. And after a couple of years, they came back and asked if I'd like to come over there and draw full time. I thought, heck, I'm kind of a mediocre reporter. I'll give this a shot. And then my career was stalled at that point for the next 35 years. So I guess what I'm getting to is I never really sat down and consciously, tried to develop a cartooning style. It's just kept on drawing with the same style I had always drawn. And
you're self-taught.
I'm self-taught, yes, ma'am. I think if I'd ever gone to an art school or something, I'd probably have had to spend a couple of years unlearning whatever I was told.
Thank you. Political cartooning, by its nature, you have a message in the cartoons. And my question to you is whether or not these messages are often based upon real-world facts and ideas. Has called the truthfulness of cartooning changed over the years? And what standards do you feel like people are compelled to follow?
Well, the truthfulness element in cartooning, I guess it needs to be an element, because it certainly in a newspaper cartoon, you're essentially one of the editorialists, for that paper, and in the traditional scheme of things, that journalists were required to be accurate, to be fair, to be unbiased, to be complete. And on the editorial page, you're obliged to be all those things except for being unbiased. You can drop that, but you still need to be complete, fair, and accurate, and truthful. Because as soon as you put something into a cartoon that's clearly at variance with the facts to a great degree, there are many people that will point that out in a great hurry. So you want to, like any other editorialist, to base your opinion on demonstrable facts. So yeah, that is an important element in cartooning, because otherwise you sort of lose your whole. That's part of that authority that we talked about, that you need to have underlying your opinion piece, and you need to be able to say, well, yes, I feel this way because these things are so. So yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, I was curious what you think about the digital age as far as sharing things on Facebook. As far as, you probably got a bigger audience now, and things going all over the world, and on the internet, you don't get paid for it. So.
Yeah, that's certainly, and that's it doesn't affect just political cartoons, but everything that goes into the digital universe. It faces that conundrum of is there a way to regulate the spread and the sharing of things? And I know lots of people among cartoonists and at journalism schools and so on have sort of tried to ponder this question, and I don't think any really good answer has has emerged because it's so hard to keep up with. You know, it's the means of disseminating this information grows so fast that I'm not sure there's an effective way that, you know, at this point that you could sort of keep up with how your cartoons are distributed and used. Certainly, just in terms of equity, you know, it would be good to be rewarded for every time somebody looks at the product of your work. But my guess is as good as yours on how, you know, what kind of mechanisms would bring that about. So it's a problem, I guess, not only cartoons, but people who take photographs and write things and write songs and everything else. It's just that the web can spread material so fast that it's difficult to keep up with who uses it.
Talk to us about the mind of the cartoonist. What is it that makes you and your colleagues able to dream up these simple pictures that have profound stories to them in such a few words? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I guess the primary trait that you have to have is to be the class smart aleck. You know, you need to be that kid that was a smart ass in school. It just because the traits that make a really good editorial cartoonist are not uncommon traits, but the combination of them, I guess, is kind of rare when they all come together in one person. You need to be able to, in order to express yourself, you need to be able to draw enough that people can tell what it is that you've drawn. And you need to have a real sort of a passion for public affairs and public issues, and to feel and to think about it, and to feel strongly about the things that go on in public life. But then, like I said, it's that last thing is probably the most important. You need that kind of smart aleck gene to kind of give you that little twist on it, so that when you say, I believe X about issue Y, you have a way of kind of making that point and getting through to the reader with that little twist to it, so that you kind of get around their defenses and kind of get inside their head and make that point in a subliminal way. So I guess those are kind of the main traits that you would look for in a good cartoonist.
I just want to know, having viewed your works over the years, do you feel that having the area of Texas politics to ridicule gave you an unfair advantage over other cartoonists?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You couldn't ask for a better field to maybe Massachusetts politics. I know my son lived up there for a while and worked in politics, and the stories were pretty amazing. But yeah, Texas politics is a unique beast in itself, and still is. And I'm glad that I still have that one outlet of being on the Observer family and being able to at least have my once a month cartoon to express myself about Texas politics, because it's like nothing else.
This is a little bit like asking which of your children you love the most, but do you have a favorite cartoon of your own that rises to that?
Oh, I guess no. I'd have to say no is the basic answer, because in those 35 years I did more than 8,000 cartoons, so it would kind of be hard to pick one out. Certainly there are ones that I remember and like better than others. There are many that I don't remember at all, because sometimes I have done a cartoon and then looking back through things realized that I did that same cartoon like 3 years before. And I think in our discussions at our meetings, we cartoonists decided that in terms of journalistic ethics, that it's okay to plagiarize from yourself, as long as the readers don't remember that you did that one before. But yeah, certainly there are ones that you're really proud of, and you really think, wow, that one made it. And then daily journalism being what it is, for whether you're a reporter or a cartoonist or whatever, that the rhythms of daily journalism mean that you've got to have something there every day, and sometimes it's better than others. Some of you are just glad you got something in the paper, and you just hope that people kind of forget about it because it's so lame. But then other days, you know, you may really, the stars will align, you come up with something really good. So, but yeah, I couldn't really put my finger on a particular cartoon out of those 8,000.
I have a quick question. How long does the average cartoon take when you're doing cartoons?
I think one time I kind of timed it out, averaged it out. I think when I was doing my cartoons for the Statesman, they took an average, once I knew exactly what I was going to draw, about 4 or 5 hours to do the actual drawing. And it irritated me when I found out that a lot of my very talented colleagues took maybe an hour or two.
Yes, I met you on Sunday, and you were the full-blooded card-carrying liberal. Did you have a mentor or somebody who helped inform your value system?
I guess if I had to pick somebody that fit that description, it would probably be my parents, who were, card-carrying labor liberal Democrats up there in Amarillo, Texas, for their whole lives, and New Deal Democrats, and so we were raised. There was, as there is in my house, there was a big portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt in our dining room at home, and so yeah, I think I probably just inherited those values from my folks, and certainly glad for that. And
I have another quick question. How many countries do you see as having the degree of freedom that we have here in terms of having editorial cartoons that don't have negative consequences necessarily for the people who are creating them?
There's probably, I'm sure it's in a minority if you look at the number of countries in the world. It probably really only include, North America and Europe in terms of countries where you could do editorial cartoons and not suffer anything more drastic than being fired or getting nasty letters to the editor. Just about the rest of the world, you could face jail, persecution, riots, getting shot. And not just cartoonists. Anyone who is highly visible and expresses an opinion, especially if it's an opinion that's critical of the ruling regime in that country, takes a risk. And we should very much highly value and treasure the protections and the liberties that we enjoy here, and hope that they eventually will spread to some of these other parts of the world.
We have another question. Would you stand?
Hamilton Richards again. I've lived in Austin since the late 70s and subscribed to the Statesman, and one of the reasons was I loved your cartoons so much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Not only the artwork, but I think I share your biases. And I wonder how much of a pushback you get from people who have the opposite bias.
Well, you certainly get lots of strong. If you're doing strong cartoons, you certainly do get strong response, and you're glad to see that. It's sort of evidence that you are doing something that's hitting home, and that people are paying attention to, and I think also indicates for the cartoonist that he's performing his job, sort of being a little part of the whole mix of the democratic conversation, and helping to stir the pot, which is kind of what makes our democracy go, is people getting engaged and having an opinion, and whatever that opinion is, and acting on it and expressing it, and you hope that cartoons will help kind of stir that, and at least make people think about about their society and yeah, certainly enjoyed much adverse reaction over the years, and usually took it as a sign that I must have hit a nerve.
Anne, do you have another question?
Would you have any word for someone that wanted to start out in cartooning? It's such a valuable craft.
Well, it is, and I probably would, if some young cartoonists are wanting to get into opinion cartooning and to make a career of it or a constant habit of it, to probably investigate the ways in which they could distribute their work online. I probably wouldn't encourage them to go to work for a newspaper because the jobs are disappearing. But certainly, it's that online is an area where I know many very talented young cartoonists who sort of are making their own way, their own outlets, and their own ways and it really gives you a lot more possibilities for ways to express yourself in the cartoon. We saw some there where they've done it in sort of a traditional strip format, but there are others that are doing animation, or I know there's a young lady named Susie Cagle who does what she calls cartoon journalism. She'll go out and has done many wonderful stories, sort of expose type stories. She's done them on exploitation of factory workers and agricultural workers out in California, on all these things of that nature, where the story is online and it's not written. It's done through cartoons. So
like a comic book.
Well, kind of, yeah. And there's another colleague of mine who had been a traditional cartoonist, named Mitchell Ramsey in Mississippi, of all places, Marshall Ramsey, who was doing that same sort of thing, doing sort of long-form type comic things that were essentially long feature articles, and doing them with drawings instead. So I'm pleased to see, there's a lot of young cartoonists who are kind of doing new things and using the tools that the web affords them to do it.
We have a question here. Would you say your name, please?
I'm Tonda Rasco. I have enjoyed your cartoons for longer than I can remember. Thank you especially for being in the Texas Observer. A question I have about the media in general and the changes that have evolved. In some ways, I think the diversity of the digital age is wonderful, but something that concerns me is this vague fear I have that in the past, when we had a place like the newspapers to go for really important information, what gaps do you see in the digital age that maybe we may have overlooked?
You bring up a great point about the downside of the digital age, is that the newspaper and the traditional broadcast news afforded a place, like you say, where when something had happened, you could turn to it and be reasonably assured that you were going to get complete, reliable, and as timely as possible information. And now, the information that you get in your computer, you don't have a clue where it's coming from, really. I mean, you have unless you are going to some place on there that you sort of have been familiar by experience with how reliable it might be, or how unbiased it might be. You just don't know. And the other, I think that a democratic society really does need a source of reliable and commonly held information, to be able to function. I think one of the most dangerous things about information on the web is the fact that you can now, if you want to, only get information that you agree with, whether you're on the left, the right, or wherever. And that's a very dangerous thing. You're just people just being in an echo chamber and not talking to each other. It's hard to have that with reconcile that with a functioning democratic society. So I think you're right to be concerned about some of the effects like that's the whole world to them.
And a couple of years ago, you recommended a book on the decline of investigative reporting, which I believe was The Loss of the News. Is that
I think that was it. I can't remember who wrote it, but yeah, my cousin in New Hampshire had sent that to me. It was a very good book. Yeah, The Loss of the News was the name of the book.
It was great. I read it.
Yeah, oh, did you? Yeah. Do you remember who did it? I
don't right now, yes, on exactly what we're talking about, and which makes it so much more difficult to do a cartoon which is based on fact.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you're going to be doing a traditional editorial cartoon, you have to assume that the people who are reading it have a certain level of information already, and that they kind of know what the cartoon is about. And in that more traditional media environment, you could be assured of that most days. But now, people may have completely different information bases in their heads.
We have a question from Pat Beulah.
It's not exactly a cartoon, but I'd be interested in your response to the Borowitz report.
The Borowitz report, refresh me.
It's in the not New York Times, it's in the New Yorker magazine.
Well, let's see. I've read the New Yorker all my life, and I can't recall what that was about.
Thanks, Andy Borowitz.
Thanks.
We'll go on to the next question and maybe come
I'm
back.
sorry. Yeah,
circle
it's
back
not,
later.
Not ringing a bell right now. Thanks.
Douglas Bauer.
I recently read a book called Age of Ambition about life in modern-day China. And in China now, there is some actual censorship, but there's a lot more self-censorship because people know what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say, or at least have some sense of that. My question to you as a cartoonist over the years, have you ever run into either actual censorship or felt like you had self-censor at some point?
I have, in my particular situation at the American Statesman, I always felt fortunate over those many years of being on a paper which generally was kind of the same political stripe as I was, and so I was really fortunate in that regard. And there are a lot of cartoonists who are not that fortunate, and for many years I was on the paper's editorial board, so I was able to kind of help shape the editorial policy. And that doesn't mean that we didn't occasionally have disagreements, and depending on different editors that were there, and some editors want to kind of throw their editor weight around a little bit just for its own sake. But I never really felt any particular sense of being silenced or being censored on things. I know lots of cartoonists have much less favorable situations than that. I guess I always felt free to express whatever I wanted to do, and I guess within the limits of, in a daily newspaper, you have limits that are imposed by good taste, I guess, where you could do a cartoon that was so tasteless that people would concentrate on that and miss the message of the cartoon. So there are sort of limitations on what you could do, and then the one we mentioned before, just the knowledge base of the readers you need to have in that cartoon. You need it to be recognizable to the readers. You wouldn't do it about some story that was so obscure that nobody knew what you were talking about. So there are limitations, but in my own situation, I never really felt censored or put upon in that way.
We have a question here. Would you stand and say your name, please?
Hi, I'm Subi Aika, and I have a question about, since you have such a keen eye on world events and especially Texas politics, how do you keep from getting depressed? Or are you naturally a positive person, or is that something that you have to kind of wrestle with?
I guess it's a good thing that I'm a naturally positive person, because it's certainly Texas politics right now is at a very depressing stage. So yeah, certainly a fertile ground for commentary on it. But you do wish that the people who live in this state would pay more attention to it, would realize more their duty and responsibility to do something about it, and come down there and vote. For God's sake, we're not really, as my wife always says, who's a former staffer for the Travis County Democratic Party, that said this is not a red state; it's a non-voting state, and that is, that in order to sort of reverse this sort of current tide of insanity that's taken over the government and public affairs of the state, that people need to get involved and need to speak up and particularly need to go down there and vote, no matter how much they try to keep you from doing it.
Have you found that because you're using humor in your cartoons that even people with different political ideologies or persuasions are able to receive your message with perhaps in a more genial or affable way? Or
Well, yeah, you hope so. I mean, it's in an editorial cartoon, and there's sort of a divide in the editorial cartooning world, or there was back when there was an editorial cartooning world, between people who regard themselves as editorialists first and making opinions, and those who kind of were doing just gag cartoons about public affairs, and there were sort of two groups of cartoonists who would bicker with each other over that, and some who thought the first thing is making an editorial statement, and others who thought the first thing is to make the readers laugh, whether you made an editorial statement or not. I think that using humor is probably the most effective tool that an editorial cartoonist has, because, like you say, if you can kind of do that and make somebody laugh and kind of get around their defenses and get under their skin, you've sort of found a way in where they'll maybe think about the editorial point you're trying to make. But if you can't make a cartoon funny, you don't worry about it. So it's an effective thing to use, but it's not really the first point of the cartoon.
if you had to maybe cite a period of time in the last few decades where you really had the most fun of all doing your cartoons, is there one, or is it every day is just a new day with fast new material?
It's kind of amazing. It's when you are in a position of being an opinion journalist, and you look at it for that long a period of time, for 35 years. One, of how much new stuff comes up. I mean, you think, my God, we've seen it all, but then the next day they will surprise you and come up with something new. And the other thing is how much things do repeat themselves, and how much some things do not change. I know I was given a little talk about cartoons to an outfit called the Equity Center a couple of months ago, which is the organization that lobbies and advocates for good public school funding, and showed them some cartoons I had done back in the late 70s, and some cartoons I'd done a couple of years ago about school funding in Texas, and they were pretty much interchangeable. I mean, it never goes away, and so yeah, it's an interesting, the texture of public life and debate is interesting, because there are some things like that just will not go away, and then there are other things that they just surprise you every day.
Have you done some textbook cartooning or cartoons discussing the decision-making process on textbooks?
Oh yeah, for many years. That's been one of my constant themes, and again, one that doesn't seem to, they won't let it go away.
We have about 1 minute left, so we're going to go to Folk Dilworth and see what he has to ask.
In today's political environment, I'd like to ask how you make your choices as to subjects to pick on. it's a target-rich environment.
Oh, it is that, and that's as much as I enjoyed the work I'm doing for the Observer now. It's a monthly panel called Lone Star State, and I enjoy that. Doing one cartoon a month is about a good level of work for me at this stage of my life. But like you say, it's just nuts when you sit down to say, well, what am I going to draw about this month? Because, good Lord, I mean, the Lieutenant Governor alone gives you material for 20 or 30 cartoons. So yeah, it is a target-rich environment for sure. And,
my question was, how do you make that choice? You've got to go down a list of things, or
oh yeah,
you try to spectrum and say that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a combination of factors. I guess one being timeliness. You know, because as the month goes on, you think, oh, this story is it. You know, this and then when it's time to do the cartoon, like 3 weeks later, you think that it's kind of receded. So timeliness is one element, but the other is just a degree of outrageousness, which you can always count on for this crowd. But yeah, so it's a matter of just looking at it and thinking, and also just think what would make a good cartoon. You know, what would really lend itself to pictorial satire. And some do and some don't. I mean, it's an interesting thing about cartoons that there are things that kind of limit what makes a good cartoon, and one of them being that the issues that are best dealt with in a cartoon are literally black and white issues, where you really can come down strongly on one side or the other. When there are issues that have a lot of moving parts, a lot of facets, it's harder to deal with them in a cartoon, because a cartoon is a very one-punch thing, and so it's kind of hard to deal with that.
I think unfortunately we're out of time.
Okay.
We want to thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming.
Thank all of you.